if I take myself back to 2021, I had a call from a constituent who had lost money on a crypto scam, as he told me at the time, and said, Lisa, you're my MP, who can I speak to in the Parliament to get redress, and who is dealing with this particular issue? And I said, yeah, I'll find this person for you. There must be something happening in the House of Commons on this type of issue, and then I'll get back to you and after putting you in touch, and we can take it forward from there. So I started to kind of look at it, and at that point, and my researcher in Parliament started to look at what had been done in the Parliament. There wasn't a group specifically focused on blockchain, crypto work at that time that was doing any work on helping people get redress. There had been no debates in the UK Parliament. In the House of Commons at that point. There had been some discussion in the House of Lords, but nothing in the House of Commons in terms of debates on the crypto sector. And it's only a few years ago, if you think about it. It's not actually that long ago, although I accept that even 1 year is quite a huge amount of time with the rapid pace of this industry. But, you know, still, I had a look. And then I said to her, well, can we now look at the population and what the population are doing with relative to this sector? Is this a kind of one-off thing that's happened to someone in my area that, you know, doesn't impact others? And the researcher came back and said, actually, back in 2021, there's about 4 million people across the UK involved in crypto at that point. And so I was like, wow, I didn't realise this. You know, the industry was way ahead of the Parliament in itself. More people were becoming involved. Now, if I look more recently, I think the FCA figures when they went to Parliament to speak about it, we're up about 9 million now. So that's a huge chunk of the population. Could be 11 or 12 by the next election. You know, it's a big voter group as well, if you think of it in political terms nowadays. But way back in 2021, even 4 million, I thought that's a huge amount of people who are involved in this sector, and this isn't just relative to my constituent. So I went back to him and said, look, there doesn't appear to be that much happening in Parliament. We don't seem to have a proper regulatory framework either in the UK at this point. So I'm not quite sure where we go from here. And he said, well, why don't you take it forward? So by trade, I'm a psychologist. So I was the first psychologist to ever be elected clinical psychologist in the House of Commons. So my background's health, not so much tech, although I have done quite a lot of health tech, which I'll come on to a bit later. So I had said, oh, I'm not sure this is for me, but tell you what, I'll try and get it off the ground, and then we'll see where we go from there and get other people who are interested, maybe have a tech background, to kind of hit the ground running with it, and we'll get it, up and running. So the first thing I did was contact an organisation called Crypto UK, who are a kind of professional body organisation who work with a lot of companies in the sector, and say, well, if I'm going to start a group, a cross-party group, then I need to have some support from industry in order to get this off the ground. We've not had any debates yet in the House of Commons, so we need to really take this forward. And they said, yeah, that's fine. We're willing to be the secretariat to your group. So we set up the group. It's the all-party parliamentary groups. If you look at them, you can see them online if you're interested, that run in the House of Commons. There are a variety of different ones, from groups that represent different countries. So, for instance, there's a group on there's groups on the Commonwealth, there's groups on various different things in the Parliament where people who are interested, politicians who are interested, can contribute to dialogue. There are also groups on specific industries. I mean, there's actually, relative to Scotland, there's one that looks at whisky, and that I think there was a gaming one. I'm not sure if there's still a gaming one, but some of the industries that are very sort of prominent in Scotland. There is some representation in terms of groups, but there hadn't been a crypto one. So we started the crypto one, got it up and running. I must say I spoke to a lot of former and fellow MPs at the time and said, look, can you be part of this group? There's quite a lot of interest from people who particularly had a finance background, who could see how things were developing in terms of decentralised finance. Some of the members of House of Lords would say, we're not doing this in this country, we're not doing this crypto, it's just all a scam. And then I had to say, well, you know, I take it that, you know, my constituent has lost money, and I accept that there'll be good and bad actors in any emerging sector. But you can't say we're not doing it, because we've already done the research and there's about 4 million people involved already. So if you think it's a scam, then surely you should be wanting to have some kind of regulatory framework and be discussing that at least. So we started to get the group underway. Sorry. This is my life, it's very difficult to get time. But I'll put that off. So basically we got the group underway, and there was a huge amount of interest from industry. They were like, wow, we've never had any kind of representation or discussion in the Parliament. I had companies coming from who are based in UK, some in the US, many from Europe wanted to come to Parliament to meet, to discuss the different types of businesses that they run, from blockchain type use cases, some for social purpose, others more so looking at gaming in different aspects of people's day-to-day lives. Some companies who obviously you know, were exchanges, others who were trying to work alongside the sector in terms of, like, I'm thinking TaxBit and some of the other companies that look at different aspects. But it was like I was all of a sudden overwhelmed by all these people who wanted to come into Parliament to speak about this sector, and they were all enthusiastic people, people who were trying to develop something, people who were great innovators, and people who were really trying to get across the message that this is a sector that's very, very important for growth in the economy, which of course is what the current government is striving for, but also for jobs of the future and for education and training for young people, because jobs of the future won't be the same as jobs when I was growing up, when my family would have said, be a doctor or be a lawyer, Lisa. They never said be an MP, I have to say. But you never take your family's advice. And so basically, you know, they were saying this, a lot of this is the future. And in order to harness the potential of the UK, you need to be discussing this in the Parliament. And if we want this sector to be more mainstream in a sense, and for the companies to be working alongside regulators and having their voices heard, which is very, very important to have this collaboration between government, regulators and industry and developers in order to make things more mainstream and have greater adoption, then we all have to work together. So the group is a great starting point for that. So we got the group up and running. If you look at a paper by Greengage, who are a company who do some research into this area, based in London, you'll see that from 2021, where, you know, there hadn't been a debate, very few mentions at all, even in the chamber of the sector, to 2024 when I was finishing, we managed to get it from practically zero contributions up to around about 250 that year alone. So you can see that having a group was really helpful to getting people's interest, to getting this sector on the agenda, and also to educate MPs, which actually has been one of the most kind of groundbreaking things I've been involved in. MPs, if you think of MPs, they go into work every day, and depending upon what's happened, can speak on anything from defence to to crime, to immigration, to health. So they're a bit like, if you think of it, like GPs, in a sense that they have to speak a little bit on everything, but perhaps don't have too much specialist knowledge in any one area, unless they've maybe come with that or they decide to really specialise when they get to Parliament. So there aren't that many who actually bring with them knowledge of this sector. So when we started to have our meetings in Parliament, we had a lot of MPs who were just interested, and members of the House of Lords who were interested and curious to learn. And I remember, because you guys and girls have, and I'm saying girls as well, because a lot of times I go and it's actually, there's not that many, but there are in this room. And that's another issue we can come on to in terms of, you know, engagement as well, that I'm quite passionate about in terms of inclusion in this sector. But when we're having the discussions, you have your own terminology a lot of the time. So you would speak about, come to Parliament, and then what would happen is people would start to say, can I contribute, etc. Of course you can, we all want to hear industry's voice. They would speak about DeFi, they would speak about CBDC, they would speak about crypto, they speak about blockchain. They, you know, it was like a whole new language. And I always remember sitting in the room one of the days, and there was a discussion about fintech, and they were talking about DeFi, and then someone started to talk about fiat, and one of the lords said, fiat, isn't that a car? Why are we speaking about cars? I thought we were speaking about finance. And I thought, yeah, it's like a different language in a sense that you bring, and we're having to, as I said at the start, bridge that communication between the Parliament, the parliamentarians and the industry. And then of course, because I had the crypto group, and it was quite wide, it was crypto and digital assets, I thought it was important to cover as much as I could. We had people who are into Bitcoin saying to me, oh wow, you shouldn't call it crypto, you should have a Bitcoin group. And it shouldn't be called crypto. And I was like, why are they saying that? So it took me a little while to get up to speed with Bitcoin maximalists. And then of course I said, well, if you want a Bitcoin group, we can have a Bitcoin group, you know, we'll develop that. And then of course you get the kind of, because there's this synergy and yet distance between the industry and parliamentarians, then there was a kind of, well, maybe we don't need government. Well, maybe we should be at the table discussing these things. No, maybe we shouldn't. Now, and now I think they've come round again to saying they should be at the table again, because obviously in the US things have progressed and there's going to be a Bitcoin reserve, etc. So we did want to try and make it as broad as possible, and that's why it was crypto and digital assets and not particularly Bitcoin, but we were including them too. So a huge amount of learning for me. A psychologist, I mean, a lot of people said, well, Parliament needs psychologists as well. I think they're probably correct. So I had a lot to do in terms of my own health work, but I started to get more and more involved in this sector. I went to Zug, to Crypto Valley, and the embassy in Switzerland were very kind and sort of did a kind of basic education for me as leader of the group, so that I could feel confident speaking about the industry, and also to learn that it's not just about finance, and that I shouldn't just be asking questions to the Chancellor in the Parliament, but I should be asking questions to the Education Secretary. That blockchain technology has applications in health, so I could be asking questions to the Health Secretary. So I could also be asking about international aid, because some of the technologies are making sure that finance goes to the most vulnerable, cutting out intermediaries, and that's very transparent on the blockchain, for instance. So there's lots of different cross-cabinet responsibilities that impacts on this sector. And then of course business and science and innovation as well. And then you can look at other applications and be thinking about transport. And so very, very wide ranging. And I think probably 2022 to 2023, we did the first inquiry report in the Parliament. The then Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, wanted a crypto hub. in the UK, and we sort of looked at how feasible that was. And we suggested at the time there should be a crypto czar, because it's cross-cabinet. You need to really have an overview in relation to so many different departments. We felt having a particular person lead up on this would be really vital. Now I see that this is happening in the US, and they're charging ahead with it. I think, well, back to our report, wishful thinking, but the UK could have been quite far ahead if we'd been able to convince that this was what was required at the time. So from starting the group, we did a lot of education sessions, we did a lot of debates in Parliament, we increased the contributions to over 200 in the last year. And then since coming out of the Parliament, I have actually never been busier. So I'm now chairing the UK-US Crypto Alliance, which helps to try to synergise the regulatory frameworks in the UK and the US in terms of this sector, hoping for a kind of lighter touch regulatory pathway for the UK, maybe not so much going down the MECA route that the EU has, which is a bit bureaucratic. I think it has a page of recommendations, and it has a report page for every day of the year. So maybe we don't need exactly all of that, and we can become a bit more competitive again, which is the hope there. And some of the other things I'm doing is continuing to educate MPs. So just this week, tomorrow, I'll be leaving from Edinburgh Airport and heading to Madrid, and we have 60 MPs coming from across the world to the Senate there, and we're going to be speaking about cybersecurity, we're going to be speaking about digital identity, we're going to be speaking about digital assets, and we're starting to have these conversations and dialogues. Next month I'll be in the European Parliament, and we're having a similar discussion there. We're taking MPs from the UK to learn about MiCA and to think about the system there, and to think about how we can kind of take the best bits of what works and create a good bespoke system for the UK. And then later in June we have representatives from the US administration coming to the Parliament for a dinner in the House of Lords, and we're going to be speaking about UK and US alignment on regulatory frameworks. So it's very, very busy. You keep me extremely active, speaking at conferences, speaking at events. It's been something that I am so glad that I have become involved in. It's exhilarating to feel you're at the forefront of technological development, of skills development, and of frontier discovery that's going to change people's lives. And to be part of that is such a privilege. We're continuing to educate MPs. One of the very, very profound things that we did that kind of galvanised it all for me was having the Children's Parliament come to speak to us in the House of Commons, where we had the children in the room, aged 9 up to maybe 15, 16. Then we had the MPs, we had the members of the House of Lords, and one of the first questions, I think it was from Roblox, I'm trying to remember, I know we want Roblox there. I spend a fortune on Roblox because I have young children, so I was wanting to speak to this guy anyway, but I'm sure he asked a question about who understands or has heard of Web3. All of the children's hands in the air, they've heard of it, they're starting to learn. Hardly any MPs hands up in the air, and very few members of the House of Lords had their hands up in the air. And I thought, this is a generational change. We have a digital generation. They're digitally native. My children are digitally native. And we owe it really to this generation coming up, and to those who are changing and shifting careers into the sector as well, to make sure that they have the educational resources, the skills development, the opportunities to achieve their full potential, and to make sure that the UK is at the forefront of technological development and innovation. and hearing how important it was to the children who said, you need to take this forward, you need to do research, you need to make sure that technological changes are also safe for us, and that, you know, there are parameters in terms of our mental health, etc. They were very I felt, you know, extremely impressive in what they said, but they also said, this is our future, and parliamentarians need to take it seriously. You need to invest your time in it and understand it, and you need to make sure that policies develop so that we can have opportunities in the UK. So I feel that, not just from my own interest perspective, not just from finding that this is an amazing sector full of innovative talent, but also for this next generation coming up, it's such an important and privileged job that I have now in the work I'm doing post-Parliament, helping to speak in parliaments, educate legislators, and make sure that we're bringing the parliaments along with the people and along with this digitally native generation that's coming up in the world now, to give them the opportunities that they should have. So thank you for having me to speak. That's a kind of deep dive into how I got here and what we're doing, and I'm very happy to take your questions. Yeah.